look like a collection of junk on the table, and that is because that's what it is. I know how to make my own tools. This is a tool. It's a clamp. Works off the same concept as this here that holds all my ribs in place. All of them have been measured for distances at the opening, and they're in the place that they need to be. This right here is a really cool concept. Actually, I'll explain the Manta Ray first. Alright, so this right here, my boat, it's got ribs, right? Same thing with the fold-up one, it's got ribs. Right here, this is a bunch of ribs. They would have been called futix. There's little different sections of it on old wooden boats. Each individual piece of a rib has a name, which is really cool. I used to know all the names of them, but now I'm just glad to know the first one. With a Manta Ray, it's got a different shape. Now you get to see with the ribs here how these ones are solid, right? They're not moving anywhere. But you also get to see how on this one, they're not only not solid, they're not connected at all. Now this right here, it's pretty small, right? But it folds out rather large. So I'm going to set this down. It's not as easy to do one-handed. Now this way, fold it up. It's about 10 inches, give or take, and extend it. That's with all the spaces. That's actually about 12 inches. There's a few parts that are a little bit longer than 10 or 12 inches. The reason for that is because they're going to be some trim. I'm going to have to trim them off to length once I get the pieces in place that need to be there. I made a basic template. I used a centerpiece and then a piece that'll slide to the right and a piece that'll slide to the left. That way I can adjust them a little bit. Use one template for making many pieces, but also be able to change, since I have it graphed out, I can change it out from left to right and adjust just a few square spaces on it to make it so that the left and the right hand side don't look exactly the same. Like say here, for example, there's a bunch of A's. That's the part on the right hand side that'll move out and then back. The Z's here will all move this way and back. They're glued to this stick and this stick. The S's here, that's all the red, that's stationary. That's not going to go anywhere. Now obviously on this I can move anything red over, and that way I can adjust the length of anything here on the left hand side that's a Z, or anything on the right hand side that's an A. I can also extend it as far as I want on either side of this stick here, depending on which piece it is, because obviously a popsicle stick is only so long. Now with the ribs on this, you see they're rounded like kind of like an old tumble home kind of boat, like the Poltava. Just a big round thing. Same thing with this here. Just a big round thing. I made sure that I got the ribs slightly adjusted so they're a little bit offset, a little bit different, going all the way front to the back. I glued them up and measured the distances above and below the popsicle stick here. That way some of them are below and some are above, and that'll actually help to adjust the bow of the ship once I start really rounding it out. When the mast comes forward on it, like you've got a a wind pushing on it. It actually pushes the front of the ship down. So you make the ship so that it's wider and slightly deeper in the front, so that it actually has more displacement and therefore more buoyancy. So that as it is pushed down, it wants to come back up. Now you can actually make that even more potent in effect by using what's called a bow plane. If you put a bow plane on the side of a ship, right as it's rounding on a large flat bottom ship, right as it's rounding, what you can do is put a bow plane there, or on a deep keel ship, you can put a bow plane coming out of the keel in the front, and you can actually adjust where you are on a wave. You can actually go on some pretty rough seas without even being able to tell that you're on it. Now this is a toy stingray. It's not real. And it's a little bit different shape than a manta ray. A manta ray would have a circular body. And I'm going to try to replicate that with steel ribs. But the thing about my steel ribs is that, well, the shape of their body isn't rounded like this, like a dolphin. It's more of a round thing like this, with the wings coming out from it. Like this part right here would be coming out from a manta ray. That would be this part right here, and then of course the center disc for a body. When I design things, I try to design it aesthetically as well as naturally. The reason that I like to choose a lot of things in nature is because I know that they work. Manta rays and stingrays both swim very similar. With the manta rays, with their size, and also the through flow technology, I'm looking at a lot of the more modern submarine designs that we have, with the flow actually going through the center of the submarine as opposed to around the outside. What they're doing in that is basically I don't know how to explain it actually. I'd have to go through it again and try to remember all the proper terms. Right now I'd have to dub my way through it, because right now I'm thinking about fish. But I'm also thinking about swimming. I'm also thinking about flying, and hopefully everything will all come together towards a common goal at the end. There's a lot of stuff that I end up screwing up, and I just use it for a test subject. Like this right here, it's got a crack in it. I knew it was probably going to crack where it did, and it's no big deal. What this is able to do is show the springiness. You bend these things like this, you actually create an extra springiness to it, which is odd, but it gives it also more flex. Very springy, very boingy. Now you can double up on the springy part and have a little bit of space in between them, top and bottom, in the center. And what that'll do is it'll actually make it so that you can control how much pressure and where it is at what point during the bend. And you can make it want to spring back into place a lot easier that way. Now the Vikings made their ships that way. Very springy, very boingy. Whereas the Welsh, when they started making their ships to combat the Vikings, they made them very robust, very thick. I don't mean thick like the HMS Nelson or anything like that, but it's closer or more akin to the old Greek ships, the mortise and tenon, except that they're layered up instead of mortise and tenon. Although there are mortise and tenon joints in nearly all wooden ships anyway. There's a few points where it's pretty essential, just because you won't be able to get in there any other way without some pretty significant tools, and it'll actually reduce the structural stability if you do it that way. So there's that to consider. These right here, I let them dry up to about 90%, and then I put them in exactly the shape that I want. And if I let them dry out for 2 days, then those will stay in exactly the position they're in, and I can use my clamps and glue them together to make better ribs. I can also, now there's a that I brought in here, although it's something I wouldn't usually bring in. This is what I work on in my vehicle. You see how tall that is? That's one of the ribs for my little Manta Ray. Now, the skin for the Manta Ray that I'm making, I have 3.5 mil painter's plastic. Now, the design that I'm using, there's actually a guy who designs submarines based on fish. They're not supposed to have people in them. He puts a pre-programmed course for the thing to follow, and it follows it. He also has different things where it'll basically do its own active sonar ping and find things underneath, like in a swimming pool is what he tests them out in. But he makes them so they move the way that a fish would. I'll show you what I mean. Alright, so on a boat, you've got a rigid backbone. This is not going to do much. It's not going to move like a fish would. It doesn't have much flex left or right, front to back, any of that. So what you do is you put in different sections. On your keel, though, if you're putting in different sections, what you're doing is you're saying, all right, I want to go from having a craft where I'm going to be quasi-stable on the deck to something where your ship is going to move the same way the wave does. If it's the wave is in the center of your ship, it's going to lift the center of your ship up, and as it travels back, it's going to lift the rest of the ship up, and as it travels back, there's also going to be the drop or the valley right behind the wave, and your ship, once it gets to the valley, is going to drop down a little bit. The reason that I'm saying ship instead of AI drone, which is what he makes, is because his intent is to make craft that go out on the ocean, and they use this technology and this rigidity and the understanding in order to make better vessels. Now, one of the things that I was looking at is you can have a structurally stable hull. That's one of the things that I was pushing on y'all. I don't design weapons for war. I design ways to save lives. A lot of the technologies that I utilize are 100 years old or older, and therefore cannot be patented, which is great. I'm still waiting. I gotta wait 2 or 3 more years before there's a thing that Henri Coanda came up with that we can all use it. I mean, it's an open patent now. It's that old, but I want to make sure that everybody has access to it, and I want to make sure that there's a statute of limitations kind of thing with those as well. Because part of it is literary, and I don't even have access to the literary. The reason for that is because of who holds the patent on the literary portion of Henri Coanda's works. Alright, now when I talk about the disc, this is 2 coffee lids from 2 different places. Now they interlock to stick together. What I aim to do, that long metal rib that I have, when I make the center disc here, what I'm basically doing is making one, well, there's that one that I put the adjustments on. This right here, basically the center of this will attach top and bottom to the center, and it'll be able to pivot. Now the tension in between each of these will be made by the distance of the plastic. The plastic will be cut so that when the things are all stretched out to the full open position, that the tension of the plastic in between them will hold them in place. Well, that and the fact they're attached to the center piece. But in the end, you're basically making a round disc with a hollow space in the center, and that's where the pilot would sit. But I'm looking at with this guy's stuff, you can make a stable platform on the inside, a life raft, if you will, and everything else could basically be stuff that you can pump a little bit of air into, or a little bit of water into, or a little bit of tension into, and expand it further and have a much bigger area to work with. Like, let's imagine we got these guys going out onto the open ocean, and they're making these videos on YouTube where they're traveling from San Francisco to Fiji, and they're traveling from Singapore to Portland, and they're traveling from Puget Sound to the Straits of Japan. You know, I mean, this is small boats that people are going out on. And some of those boats, they're not exactly sturdy. I mean, this is not your lifeboat. This is your actual ship that you're going out on there on. And then there's also the guy who went all the way across the Atlantic in a racing trimaran. The two pontoons that are on the side are less than 6 inches wide. They're less than a foot tall. I think they're less than 8 inches tall. I mean, this thing is just tiny. It's long. It's like 61 feet, I think. But, I mean, it's barely as wide as a human being. Barely. And he's got to have everything that he's going to go across the ocean in that thing. He's also got to make sure that he times it for the right time of the year. If it's too gusty, he's going to flip over and not be able to right himself. And that's a lot of stuff that when I look at a design, I go, all right, let's say we've got the average Joe out there, and he's an idiot, and he doesn't realize what's going on, or he got really sick and is pretty well screwed right now. How are we going to make it so that somebody in that position will still be able to rescue themselves, or at least right themselves well enough that they don't friggin' die before Coast Guard gets there to straight their sorry backsides? Now, some of y'all got to see the boat design that I made a lot of years ago, the one that I called the barrel boat. I'm making a model of it. I have some of these over here that are actually pre-stressed, and they're set to the exact right sizes that I want. And the little pieces that I designed for it, they're going to slide out of it and do a lot of other really cool stuff. I've got most of those pieces assembled and put together. And I'll also be able to use some of those pieces as I screw them up to be able to make a miniature model of what I plan on doing with this. One of the major things is I look at the dynamics of what you're going to have to work with around you. What are you going to be able to find out there to actually fix or repair your things with? And a lot of these Atlantic crossings and Pacific crossings that people are making that they're putting on video, I've been watching a few of them, see the different types of boats, how they work. One of them that I'm really impressed with right now is called a Warrum, and it's actually lashed together. It's basically two boat hulls that are made out of marine fiber or marine plywood, and they're lashed to 5 center posts tied to them, ropes. And apparently they're some of the most popular boats right now for individuals who are going out and sailing, because it's less likely to tip over, and it's something that one person can sail, and it's called hands-off sailing. They show you how to do that as well. A lot of y'all have this electronic need. You need electronic voodoo in your lives. But some of the stuff that I've been learning about, gyroscopic compasses, gyroscopes themselves, and of course a lot of the wind leads and things like that, these are all mechanical devices. There's no electronics in them, none, not even a little bit. I mean, I guess it could be said that a magnetic compass, if you move it a whole bunch, it kind of sort of creates an electric charge, but all right, you can have that argument. I'll let you in that one. Anyway, I was just wanting to show you the difference between what I'm working on here versus what I'm working out in my vehicle. I do have a couple of center frame posts for that are pretty thick aluminum, and they've got a bunch of pre-drilled professional holes, so they're less likely to crack or break along that fault line, which is really cool. And I should be able to bend the rib for it over pretty easily. Now, whether or not it's going to work for being a submersible or for flying, I don't know. I'm making that a 3.5 mil thick plastic. I don't actually plan on submerging it or flying it. What I plan on doing is just making sure that it floats. If it'll float and it's rigid enough not to completely fall apart doing that, then I'll think about doing, more adjusting. But one of the things that I learned very early is that if you invest all of your money and all of your funds and all your eggs into something that you have not tried and tested, you are throwing your money away. Obviously, I'm trying to deal with some anxiety right now by talking to my telephone as if any of you care, but it's something that I'm passionate about, something that I care about, and I think that the idea of having a center hull that's a pressure hull for, basically anybody in an emergency, I think that's a pretty important thing to start off building a boat with. And anything on top of that can be as flimsy as you want it to be, as long as you know what you're doing. If you want to make yourself one of those clown fun houses on top of it, or, the zebra, or what's the other one? The giraffe blow up houses that you can go and jump around in. I think you should be able to attach something like that to an emergency hull. And most of the time, you can hop around in your fancy fun house all you want. You got plenty of space to move around, plenty of space to work with, plenty of space to get exercise or to enjoy the outdoors. But also, if things really get bad, you don't want that stuff getting torn off by the sea. So if it'll deflate, it's easy to pack away. Then you can get into your emergency vehicle and ride the storm out. One of the reasons I've been trying to push the plastics real heavy is because of the power to weight ratio of some of the later ideas that I'll be working on. Because obviously I don't have a center hull to work with. What I'm working with is literally a 12-foot kayak. So my 12-foot kayak is going to be the test subject for some of the stuff that I'm testing out on a smaller scale. And there's a couple of different projects that I've got as far as that goes that are going to hopefully come together into one project. Just because I like being artistic and I also like making things that work. And I figure if I can put the two together seamlessly, I might as well try. The ultimate goal here is to make stuff that anybody who wants to can make, and also showing that everything that I make can be made in multiple different ways. If you've got a background in woodworking, most of my stuff can be made just with woods. If you've got a background in metalworking, most of my stuff can be made just with metals. What you're doing is you're taking a basic plan and you're structurally stabilizing it where it needs to be. I can show you where to stabilize it if you're going to be making that out of wood, where to stabilize it if you're making that out of metal. If you're mixing materials, what you're going to have to deal with is different rates of expansion and contraction, and there's ways to deal with that that are pretty important, and materials that can assist you in that. I'm also somebody who spent time building stuff, being a construction worker, and then spent a lot of time out in the woods having to help build kitchen camps and get things running, basically being the jack of all trades. I might not be able to fix something perfectly, but I'm the guy who can get it working again and again and again for at least a few minutes. One of the situations we had at the kitchen camp in Colorado was we had a generator that ran off the windmill, and the windmill wasn't going to stay on track because I'm trying to remember what they call it on a windmill. It's basically the drive shaft, though, and it spins, and it spins in a bearing, and it doesn't spin perfectly in the bearing on the smaller ones where it's attached to the teeth, which on a lot of them it's a belt, but when it's attached to a generator like that, it's a mesh set of teeth. But it's stupid. It's like on a bike, like a pedal bike, those kind of teeth. And it slips all the time, and it wears way easily, and it comes apart. So I was able to fix it on multiple occasions by putting some bungee straps across, and then I would adjust them and grease them, and hopefully that would hold for a bit. And it would usually hold for, I don't know, 5 or 6 days. But of course the thing is spinning, and it's also not spinning as fast as it should because it's got tension on it. And it's also still going to burn through. And eventually you get a bungee cord that goes flying across camp, and that's scary. We tried it with shirts, where we took the shirts and we twisted them in a rope and tried doing it that way. We had tried it once with fishing line, and that was so much of a hassle, so much of a mess, we didn't finish. Ultimately, what needed to happen is they needed a new drive shaft, and because they hadn't replaced the drive shaft with something that was straight, or at least tried to straighten the drive shaft, which I was instructed not to do because it would be impossible to get it back together. No, it wouldn't have. It was 4 bolts at the top that are for taking that apart. I've done it before on that model. But when people know better than you do, they're going to tell you they know better than you do, even if they don't. And if it's their stuff, you just have to let it run its course as they belong. But when they're throwing a tantrum in camp because they want it fixed, sometimes it's best to be diplomatic and make sure that you keep the peace. Fix it at least well enough for now. And that did make him happy. When I fixed it well enough for now, I told him every time that it would just be temporary. And I also let him know when he had the suggestion that we use bungee straps, because I was telling him I was thinking about using bungee straps, but it was probably a bad idea. Even greased, it was going to wear down, and it probably wasn't going to keep tension proper. And also the fact that the rod was already warped, those weren't going to keep it warped, keep it unwarped. Those just kept a little bit of the warp out of it, enough to keep taut. And over time that wore it down enough that it needed the drive shaft actually replaced, and it definitely needed all the teeth and the gears replaced. I guess I'm done entertaining myself for now. The sun just came out. It's been the first time in a few days. I'm going to take some of my bigger stuff back out to the vehicle. I only brought it in to show it to you and compare it side by side. And of course, show you my template and what I'm working with. The blue tape, I can use a piece of that 10 or 15 times before I have to replace the piece. I'll show you what I mean. This piece right here, it's holding all these together. This piece will hold for a good 2 to 3 months. If I don't need to use these, I can just set them aside for 2 to 3 months. Now the sun's starting to come out, though, I'm going to set these in the sunlight and try to get them sun-baked, and that way it'll help to hard set them by getting the moisture out that last 10%. Alright, you know how we end these videos. Good to be with you. Thanks for coming to visit. Stay out of trouble or don't get caught. Remember, you are your brother's keeper and no victim left behind.